Welcome back. Okay, so some news of the day, including some that came out last night, that the Colorado Avalanche, their games are postponed through February 11th. And this is where we're at. So, like, for instance, tomorrow there's 4 games that we're supposed to be on that are postponed. And for people who might be saying, all right, that's it, shut down the league, the answer is that's not going to happen. Other leagues, whether it's been basketball or baseball, when there's been outbreaks, it just affects that team's schedule, how many games that team plays, and they keep the other games going. So there is, of course, as I reported yesterday, a lot being looked at in terms of changing how the testing is done, how teams' protocols work, and they're looking at adding the rapid tests as well, which are not as accurate. So that's the concern they have with those ones, and they're also maybe an issue with getting enough supply to be able to do that with every single person they need to. It's not just the players either, right? So for the Avs, they're out of action for roughly the next week, and then they'll be, you would have to assume, back out there. But yeah, this was connected to the Minnesota Wild game that they played the other night, and yeah, this is still a situation that, and I want to say too, I know that there are leanings towards, hey, look, the Canadian division hasn't been affected yet, right? But while the risk is lower in Canada than it is south of the border, just in terms of case numbers, the per capita, it's lower in Canada than the U.S. It's still not nothing. So once it gets into that environment, once one player potentially has it, then yeah, all that goes out the window. So no victory laps being taken here. And again, and if you listen to the 31 Thoughts podcast, basically Elliot Friedman saying as well, and others have said this too, the NHL teams knew 56 games was an optimistic hope, that they were hopeful to get 56 games in, but they knew that they may not, and they've been looking at winning percentage the whole way through. So there you go. We'll see how many games they get in, and how much room there is to get some stuff rescheduled before playoffs. And for St. Louis and Arizona, they're rescheduling a couple of their games because they're being affected by Colorado and Minnesota being out. So they're now going to play Saturday and Monday due to the Avalanche being off the ice. And yeah, Saturday and Monday we'll see St. Louis and Arizona play again. And of course, they've just finished a 2-game set. So that'll be interesting. And of course, these jerseys, we'll see if we see them again after last night's game. I like this jersey. I do. I apologize, but I do. I think it's fine. I don't, but I understand that the way that last night's game went. If Blues fans are like, I don't want to see that again, I totally understand that too. Pierre-Luc Dubois has been waiting patiently, because there's not much else he can do, to make his debut for the Winnipeg Jets, and that should be this coming Tuesday. So the hope was that the government would make some allowance for him to not have to do the full 2-week quarantine, and he's had to do the full 2-week quarantine. So for other Canadian teams looking at making trades, this is something that they're going to be looking at, where it's like, okay, so there won't be any kind of allowance for players like we saw during training camp. All right, 14 days it is. So, yeah, Dubois' debut, again, should be Tuesday. Ovechkin last night did officially pass Mike Gartner, so just for people paying attention to this kind of thing, he has 609 goals, Gartner 608, Esposito's next up at 617. Yeah, Ovechkin should be able to reach that by the end of this season. And again, I know we all look at who's number one and how far over he is from that, but he's already moved up into easily first ballot Hall of Fame. Won't be any kind of a problem. And so, yeah, Ovechkin, we'll see how long it takes him to catch Espo. Few hat tricks, he's there. And we may see 3 or 4 or 5 hat tricks from him over the next couple of weeks. It could happen because it's Ovechkin, so I won't rule it out. Speaking of hat tricks, Jason Spezza last night, he became the second oldest player to get a hat trick. So I thought, all right, well, who is the oldest player? Yeah, it's Yager. So yeah, that makes sense. I thought, well, did Marlowe get one? No, it's Yager. So yeah, Spezza's the oldest player in the league to get a hat trick not named Yager. I was actually kind of surprised it wasn't Gordie Howe as well. But yeah, so kudos to him. And it was something that I've always had this, and this goes back years. So this is where me being a Canuck fan for 40 years really helps during times like this, during the dark times. So gather around. So the idea is that if a goaltender's struggling, good news, you got to play the Canucks tonight. If a player needs to hit a milestone or you haven't had a big night in a while, hey, go play the Canucks. And Spezza, you played the Canucks. There you go. You got your hat trick. Toffoli, you're off to a slow start. Here's the Canucks. It's been a running joke for me. I know back when these guys here had Sanford as a goaltender, he owned Vancouver. Like it was weird. It's like, wow, we made Sanford look like Patrick Waugh. That's great. So I don't know what it is, but kudos to Jason Spezza for getting the hat trick. And yeah, and then there were people last night pointing out, hey, they weren't actually waving him to move him down. They were waving him. It was a paper move. I know. I'm just saying teams could have taken him on waivers. It's just interesting that he gets waived, and now he gets the hat trick. So that's the only point I was trying to make. New York Rangers, they pulled the kind of, I'm not going to say they pulled a fast one, but they made a smart move today. They've promoted Chris Drury to the assistant general manager spot. Now, Chris Drury was one of the names that had been on the Pittsburgh Penguins list, so it's quite possible the Rangers gave him this promotion to keep him from going to Pittsburgh. And when you really like a guy and you want to keep him in your organization, you do this. Kelly McCrimmon in Vegas, when he was promoted to general manager, and George McPhee was made team president, a lot of that was because other teams really wanted Kelly McCrimmon, and Vegas didn't want to lose him. So yeah, Chris Drury, likely quite happy to be in New York, and if his name being tied to Pittsburgh helped him get a promotion, I'm sure there might be a gift basket heading to the Pittsburgh Penguins from Chris Drury. Like, thanks for the promotion, without doing anything. Now, we talked about the draft last week. Here's an interesting thing, and this is apparently really being considered. So because we aren't seeing the scouting on players that we normally do, and I'm going to be honest, I kind of feel bad for sites right now like Elite Prospects, Hockey Prospect, and all these, because there's not a lot of hype about this year's draft. And it's because WHL not playing, QMJHL got shut down for a while, OHL not playing yet. And so there is now some real talk about the National Hockey League pushing this year's draft to 2022. And we would have 2 drafts in 2022. One for the 2021 draft class and one for the 2022 draft class. That would make for a fascinating year, because what that does is it means that we don't have any of the 18-year-olds coming in next year. So here's the other fascinating part. If the NHL ever wanted to change the draft age to 19, that's how you do it. You just don't have a draft class during this year. You say, well, that's pandemic related. Oh, and we're going to bump up the age to 19. You have to get the NHLPA on board with that as well, but it'll be interesting to see if that changes. So, yeah. The NHL is looking at maybe moving it back to having 2 drafts in 2022. And I don't know if that means that we don't even bother having a draft lottery. Maybe we know the draft order for next year's draft, and we don't know how that's going to work until next year. And so, and then that would does that help or hurt the value of 2021 draft picks? Do we still call it the 2021 draft if you have it in 2022, or do we call it 22A and 22B? Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. And I guess if they did raise the draft age, then you don't have to have 2 drafts in 2022. You just need the one, and then that creates chaos too. So forget I even said that. Just thinking through my head, I'm like, nah, they can't do that. So yeah, Ron Hexdall is the most interesting name I've seen attached to potentially being the next Pittsburgh GM. Ron Hextall is a good general manager. I understand that, there were a lot of bad feelings going on in Philadelphia at the time he was let go, and that it was kind of a messy breakup. But you look at the moves he made, and you look at where Philadelphia is right now, and you look at the team he put together, he did a pretty good job. And it's not that Chuck Fletcher hasn't done a good job as his replacement either, because he has. But Hextall's a decent GM. Maybe a bit too patient sometimes, but he's a decent GM. And so if Pittsburgh picked him up, I think it'd be very interesting. And that, of course, Hextall is really identified as a flyer since the 80s. I know he played elsewhere, but he's a flyer. And so it would be fascinating to see him running the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I think it would be a good hire. So that's the one that stands out to me. But we'll find out probably, I'm going to say they said it was a 2 to 3 week period they were looking at. So I would think maximum 2 weeks from now, we'll know who actually takes the place of Jim Rutherford. I also wanted to talk about this here. TSN, which is owned by Bell, laid off 200 people yesterday. If you watch their news and you're like, hey, I haven't seen Natasha this week. Natasha's one of the ones they let go. They also let go of Dan O'Toole, who, of course, Jay and Dan, their show was on in the States. Jay is still there. So they cut Dan loose. And the weird thing is, they didn't tell Dan before his last broadcast that it was his last broadcast, which I don't like. I don't like the idea that you get up and you're like, all right, I get to go to work. And they're like, yeah, we let you go. Last night was your last night. Really? So, yeah, and then Brent Wallace was let go too. And I think Brent Wallace posted on Twitter he'd been there for 23 years. This is why I do this job every day. And I enjoy doing this job every day. And I don't take it overly seriously. Because I think once you take all of this too seriously, I think it can become kind of difficult. You're like, wow, 365 days of this, huh? So I do make sure I keep it as light as possible when I'm talking to everybody on the webcam here. And I still treat this the same as I did when I started out. That I talk like I'm just talking to friends of mine, at a former workplace or talking to family back east, because that's initially where I started out making my videos. That's who the target audience was. So I still talk like that. And so when people talk about, it's too bad you're not on TSN or Sportsnet. Over the last year, I've watched as now TSN has done this, and Sportsnet's certainly done it as well, where you'll see a lot of on-air personalities just cut. And, I know they start podcasts. Everybody has a podcast. I haven't done a podcast in a long time because part of it is everybody, all the world has podcasts right now. So, I do need to do a podcast at some point soon. But yeah, when I see this from TSN, and the weird thing is that Bell took money from the Canadian government as kind of like the bailout for businesses hurt during the pandemic. They took, was it it's over $100 million, and they're laying people off. It's a bad look for a company that I'm pretty sure has the money to keep those people around. But, corporate profits being as they are, they make those cuts. And I feel bad for Dan. I know he's had his challenges over the last 12 months. I wish him the best. There are certain people that I watch on TV and I'm like, he's got a personality a lot like mine. Tim McAuliffe on Sportsnet being one of them, and Dan O'Toole being another. Although Jay Onrait has my sarcasm, I know that his blog that he would do on trade deadline day was always the headline for me of any trade deadline day. I would be following his blog as much as I'd be watching what was going on Sportsnet or TSN, because you're watching anchors trying to fill dead air and nothing's happening. And so sometimes his blog was the most entertaining part of trade deadline day. But that's how the media works, is that you're just gone. And sometimes you don't know when it's coming. Sometimes you have a good idea when it's coming. Sometimes you just don't know. And so there's a certainty I have by waking up every morning and making videos for everybody who's watching this right now, that if I worked for a media company, I might not have. Or they might be like, yeah, so the ratings for your segment, not where we'd like it to be, and it just doesn't fit our product, so we're going to let you go. And then there you go. That's it. The whole thing's over. So, I'm very happy here and doing this every day. And to people who got laid off, hopefully they all land on their feet. This is a really rough time to be getting laid off. And to Bell, I find it interesting that a week after Bell Let's Talk, where they talk about, we need to talk about mental health issues, that they lay off a guy like Dan O'Toole, who we know had his own mental health break last year, and now they're laying him off. So I don't know. It's just, it didn't sit well with me last night, and I said when I posted on Twitter about this, I said I'd talk about it today. So here I am. It's tough. It's a cutthroat industry, and I'm glad I'm not in it. I'm just a YouTuber. And I could not be happier about that. So there you go. All right. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.